The notification changed everything at 10:32 p.m. on a Tuesday that felt like any other disaster. Tasha Wilson stared at her phone screen, the blue light illuminating her exhausted face as she lay in her king-sized bed, a bed that had been empty for longer than she cared to admit. The dating app notification mocked her. Your match didn't respond. Try someone new. Another ghost, another waste of mascara and hope. At 34, Dr. Tasha Wilson was the kind of woman other people envied from the outside. Her therapy practice was booked solid for 3 months out. Her clients called her a miracle worker. She'd helped hundreds of people find love, heal trauma, and rebuild their lives. But here she was, scrolling through dating apps at midnight, wondering why she couldn't fix her own heart. She was about to turn off her phone when it happened. The message that would shatter every boundary she'd spent years building. Hi, Tasha. I know this is unexpected. It's Ethan Blake. I've been thinking about you. Her breath caught. The phone nearly slipped from her trembling fingers. Ethan Blake, the man who had sat in her office chair exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. The man who had poured out his deepest fears about commitment, about love, about trust. The man she had quietly, unprofessionally, impossibly fallen for during their sessions. The man who had vanished without explanation, leaving her questioning everything she thought she knew about her own judgment. And now he was back.
3 days later, Tasha found herself doing something she'd sworn she'd never do again. She was waiting for Ethan at Cafe Luna, the same coffee shop where she'd had her last disastrous date just a week before. Her hands shook as she stirred her untouched latte, and not from the caffeine. She'd spent 72 hours telling herself she wouldn't respond to his message. She'd typed and deleted replies 17 times. She'd called in sick to work, something she hadn't done in 4 years, and spent hours staring at the ethics guidelines she'd memorized in graduate school. Former clients are off limits, always, no exceptions. But when she saw him walk through that door, tall and confident with those same piercing green eyes that had haunted her dreams, every rule she'd ever learned evaporated like steam from her coffee cup. Tasha, his voice was deeper now, more certain. You look incredible. He looked incredible too, and that terrified her. Ethan, She started to say what she'd rehearsed, that this was inappropriate, that she couldn't see him, that he needed to leave. Instead, she found herself saying, You disappeared. He sat down across from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, different from before, more expensive. I know, I was a coward. I ran because... He paused, those green eyes searching hers. Because what I was feeling for you scared the hell out of me. The words hung in the air between them like a confession and a promise. Ethan, you were my client. This is... Was. He interrupted gently, past tense. And we're not in your office now. She should have left. Should have walked away. Should have remembered that she was the professional, the one with boundaries, the one who knew better. But when he reached across the table and touched her hand, electricity shot through her entire body. For the first time in 3 years, she felt truly alive. I've changed, Tasha. I know you probably don't believe me, but I have. Those sessions with you, they saved my life. And I know this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about what we could be. She pulled her hand away, but the damage was done. The spark was lit. This is insane, she whispered. The best things usually are, he replied, and when he smiled, she remembered why she'd fallen for him in the first place.
2 weeks in, and Tasha was living a double life. By day, she sat in her office, helping other people navigate their relationships with wisdom and clarity. By night, she was texting Ethan like a teenager, her heart racing every time her phone buzzed. They met in secret, quiet restaurants across town where none of her colleagues would go. Long drives to hidden beaches where they could talk without fear of being seen. Hotel bars in neighboring cities where she could pretend, for a few hours, that she was just a woman falling in love. And she was falling, fast and hard and completely against her better judgment. Tell me about your day, Ethan would say, and she'd find herself sharing things she'd never told anyone. Her fears about growing old alone, her secret dream of writing a book, the way she sometimes cried in her car after particularly difficult sessions with clients. He listened in a way no one ever had before, not as a client seeking answers, but as a man who wanted to know everything about her. "You're incredible," he'd whisper against her ear as they danced in empty bars to music nobody else was listening to. "I can't believe I almost lost you." The guilt was always there, lurking in the background like a shadow. When her best friend Julia asked why she was glowing lately, Tasha lied and said she'd started a new skincare routine. When her colleague, Dr. Martinez, noticed she was distracted during staff meetings, she blamed it on a difficult case. But late at night, when Ethan's arms were around her in anonymous hotel rooms, the guilt felt worth it. He was different now, more open, more vulnerable. He talked about his future, their future, in ways that made her heart soar. "I was so screwed up when I first came to you," he admitted one evening as they walked along an empty pier. "I couldn't let anyone get close, but you saw through all my walls. You made me realize I was worth loving." "You were always worth loving," she replied, and meant it. "But I couldn't see it then. I was too broken, too afraid." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'm not afraid anymore, Tasha. Not of you, not of this." When he kissed her under the starlight, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, some rules were meant to be broken. But deep in her heart, a small voice whispered a warning she wasn't ready to hear. "You diagnosed him as emotionally unavailable for a reason. People don't change that fast, do they?" The first crack appeared during lunch with her best friend Julia. "Okay, spill," Julia demanded, pointing her fork at Tasha across the table at their usual bistro. "You've been different for weeks, glowing, secretive, and don't even try to tell me it's that new face cream, because I bought the same one and I still look like I haven't slept since 2019. Tasha forced a laugh, cutting her salad into smaller and smaller pieces to avoid eye contact. "I don't know, feeling good lately." "Tasha Wilson, I've known you since college. You're many things, but you're not a liar. So either tell me who he is or I'm staging an intervention." The weight of the secret felt heavier every day. She wanted to tell Julia everything about the midnight messages, the stolen weekends, the way Ethan made her feel like she was finally living instead of just existing. But every time she opened her mouth, the words stuck in her throat. "It's complicated," she finally admitted. "The best ones always are," Julia replied, unknowingly echoing Ethan's words from their first coffee date. "Just promise me you're being careful. You have a tendency to try to save people instead of loving them." That night, Tasha confronted Ethan about their secrecy during one of their clandestine dinners. "How long do we keep hiding?" she asked, watching him carefully. "I feel like I'm living a lie." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "Soon, babe, I promise. I need to make sure everything's perfect first. You know how people will talk. You're the successful therapist, and you're not just anything. But I can't keep lying to my friends, to my colleagues." "I know, and we won't have to wait much longer." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Trust me, I have a plan, something that will show everyone how serious I am about us." But as the weeks passed, Ethan's promises felt increasingly hollow. He'd make romantic gestures, flowers delivered to her office, surprise picnics, expensive jewelry, but he'd deflect whenever she tried to discuss their future in concrete terms. "Where do you see us in a year?" she asked one evening. "Together," he replied simply. "But where? Your place? Mine? Are we talking about moving in together? Why do we need to label everything?" He pulled her closer. "Can't we just enjoy what we have?" The words hit her like ice water. She'd heard them before, 3 years ago in her office when she'd asked him about his fear of commitment. "You said you'd changed," she whispered. "I have changed. I'm here, aren't I? I chose you." But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the same man who used to sit in her client chair, charming and wounded and utterly terrified of anything real. She was falling in love with his potential again, and she was the only one who couldn't see it. The proposal came on a Thursday night at Enzo's. the upscale Italian restaurant where she'd brought her closest friends to meet the man she'd been secretly seeing for 3 months. Julia sat to her left, Dr. Martinez to her right, and her college roommate Rebecca across the table. She'd finally decided to introduce Ethan as someone she'd met through mutual friends. Not technically a lie, but not the whole truth either. The evening had been perfect. Ethan was charming, asking thoughtful questions about her friends' lives, making them laugh with stories that didn't quite reveal how well he already knew Tasha. She'd started to relax, to imagine a future where she wouldn't have to live in shadows. Then, just as dessert arrived, Ethan stood up. "Actually, I have something I want to say," he announced, his voice carrying across their corner of the restaurant. Tasha's heart stopped. "Ethan, what are you—" But he was already dropping to one knee beside her chair, pulling out a black velvet box that caught the candlelight like a promise. "Tasha Wilson," he said, his green eyes locked on hers, "you saved my life. You saw me when I couldn't see myself. You believed in me when I'd given up on love entirely." The restaurant had gone quiet around them. Other diners were turning to watch, phones coming out to capture the moment. Julia gasped. Rebecca started crying. "I know this might seem fast to everyone else," Ethan continued, "but when you know, you know. Tasha, will you marry me?" The ring was beautiful, a vintage emerald cut diamond that must have cost months of his salary. Everything she'd ever dreamed of was happening right here, right now, in front of the people she loved most. She should have been over the moon. She should have been crying happy tears and throwing her arms around his neck. Instead, she felt like she was watching someone else's proposal. Ethan, she stammered, aware that everyone was watching, waiting for her answer. "Yes," she heard herself say, because what else could she say? "Yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. Her friends were hugging her, examining the ring, demanding to know how they'd kept this relationship secret. Ethan was beaming, accepting congratulations from strangers like he'd just won an award. But as they settled back into their seats, as the champagne appeared and the celebration began, Ethan made a joke that changed everything. "You know," he said, grinning at Dr. Martinez, "I never understood why people pay so much money to sit in a room and talk about their feelings. I mean, isn't that what bartenders are for?" He laughed, completely oblivious to the silence that followed. Dr. Martinez forced a smile. "Well, therapy has helped millions of people." "Oh, I'm sure it works for some people," Ethan waved dismissively. "I'm just saying, most of the time people just need to get over themselves, stop overthinking everything and just live." Tasha felt the blood drain from her face. Around the table, her friends, all of whom knew how much her work meant to her, sat in uncomfortable silence. "Ethan," she said quietly, "that's not really—" He interrupted her with a smile. "Come on, babe, you know what I mean. All that touchy-feely stuff. Sometimes people just need someone to tell them to snap out of it." He was talking about her life's work, her calling, the thing that had brought them together in the first place, and he was dismissing it like it was nothing. In that moment, sitting in her engagement ring under the warm restaurant lights, Tasha saw everything with crystal clarity. She was still trying to save him, still seeing his potential instead of his reality, still playing therapist instead of partner. And he had never seen her at all.
Tasha didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, the same bed where she'd received Ethan's first message, turning the engagement ring around and around on her finger until her skin was raw. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dismissive smile on his face when he'd mocked her profession, her life's work, her identity. The ring felt heavy as a chain. At 3 a.m., she got up and pulled out her laptop. She did something she'd avoided for 3 years. She opened Ethan's old client file. Page after page of her careful notes stared back at her. Client exhibits pattern of dismissing others' emotional needs, struggles with empathy, particularly regarding professional boundaries, uses charm to deflect serious conversations about commitment, emotionally unavailable, seeks excitement over genuine intimacy. She'd written it all down, every red flag, every warning sign, every reason why he wasn't ready for a real relationship. And then she'd ignored it all. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Can't wait to start planning our life together. You make me so happy, babe." She stared at the message until the words blurred. He'd called her babe throughout their relationship. Never sweetheart, never love, never her actual name unless other people were around. Just babe. Generic, interchangeable, meaningless. At 6 a.m., she called in sick again and drove to the beach where they had shared their first real kiss. But this time, she went alone. The morning was gray and cold, matching the storm in her heart. She sat on the rocks and let herself feel everything she'd been avoiding for months. She wasn't in love with Ethan. She was in love with the version of him she'd created in her mind, the man who could change, who could grow, who could become what she needed him to be. She'd been trying to heal him instead of loving him. Worse, she'd been trying to heal herself through him. Her phone buzzed. Julia. "Tasha, where are you? I've been worried sick since last night." "I'm at the beach." "Which beach? I'm coming." "Jules, don't." "The hell I won't. You look like you'd seen a ghost after he proposed. What's going on?" So Tasha told her everything, the whole truth, sitting on those cold rocks with waves crashing at their feet. About the client relationship, about the 3 years of silence, about the secret meetings and the lies and the ring that felt like a beautiful prison. Julia listened without judgment, holding her best friend as she cried for the first time in months. "You know what you have to do," Julia said gently. "I know." Tasha wiped her eyes and looked at the ring. "I know." That evening, she met Ethan at his apartment. He was cooking dinner, humming happily, acting like their engagement was the most natural thing in the world. "How's my fiancé?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "I was thinking we could have a spring wedding, maybe somewhere tropical." "Ethan, we need to talk." Something in her voice made him turn around. "I can't marry you," she said simply. The words hung in the air like a judgment. "What?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Babe, if this is about last night, I didn't mean anything by it. You know I support your work." "Do you?" She pulled the ring off her finger and set it on his kitchen counter. "Do you even know what I do, Ethan? Really?" "Of course I do. You help people." "I save people. Or at least, I try to. Just like I've been trying to save you." "But you don't need saving, Ethan. You need someone who accepts you exactly as you are. And I need someone who sees me as more than a project." "Tasha, you're not making sense. We're perfect together." "No, we're not," she said calmly, certain now. "We never were. I fell in love with who I thought you could become, not who you are. And that's not fair to either of us." He stared at her, confusion and hurt warring on his face. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" "I'm not giving up. I'm finally being honest." She picked up her purse. "I hope you find someone who loves you for you, Ethan. Really loves you, because you deserve that." "And what about you?" The question stopped her at the door. She turned back one last time. "I'm going to learn to love myself first. For real this time." Walking away from him was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but with each step, she felt lighter. The chain was broken. 6 months later, Tasha sat in a chair she'd never expected to occupy, the client chair. Dr. Amanda Foster was everything Tasha aspired to be, wise, warm, and utterly unshakable. She'd been recommended by Dr. Martinez, who'd noticed the change in Tasha after her broken engagement. "What brings you here today?" Dr. Foster asked, and Tasha almost laughed at how familiar the question sounded from this side of the room. "I think I've been playing therapist in my personal life," she admitted, instead of actually living it. It took weeks to unravel the patterns she'd been weaving her entire adult life, the way she chose men who needed fixing, the way she confused healing with loving, the way she'd hidden behind her professional identity instead of discovering who she really was. "Tell me about your parents," Dr. Foster said one day, and Tasha found herself talking about her father, brilliant, troubled, an alcoholic who died when she was 16. "I spent my teenage years trying to save him," she realized out loud, "and when I couldn't, I guess I never stopped trying." "With other people," Dr. Foster observed. With other people. The work was harder than anything she'd ever done. Facing herself, truly facing herself, was more terrifying than any difficult client session. But gradually, something began to shift. She started saying no to dates with men who reminded her of projects. She began having honest conversations with her friends instead of managing their emotions. She took up painting, something she'd loved as a child but had abandoned as impractical. 3 months into therapy, she ran into Ethan at a coffee shop. Not Cafe Luna, she'd never gone back there, but a new place near her office. He looked good, happy even. He was with a woman who laughed at his stories without trying to fix him, who seemed content to let him be exactly who he was. "Tasha," he said when he saw her, "how are you?" "I'm good," she replied, and meant it, really good. They talked for a few minutes, polite, distant, like acquaintances who'd known each other in another life. When he introduced his companion, there was no awkwardness, no lingering romantic tension, just two people who had found what they needed, even if it wasn't with each other. "I hope you're happy," she told him as they parted ways. He said, "I am. You too?" Getting there. And she was. Every day, she was getting there. A year after her broken engagement, Tasha made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She scaled back her private practice and started teaching, sharing what she'd learned about the blurred lines between healing and loving, between professional boundaries and personal growth. Her first lecture was titled "The Therapist Paradox: When Helpers Need Help." "The hardest lesson I ever learned," she told a room full of graduate students, "was that you can't love someone into being who you need them to be. You can't therapy your way out of incompatibility, and you can't save anyone who doesn't want to save themselves." She paused, looking out at the young faces staring back at her. "But here's what you can do. You can show up authentically. You can love bravely. And you can choose people who see your whole self, not just the parts they want to fix or be fixed by." After the lecture, a young woman approached her. "Dr. Wilson, what if you realize you've been making the same mistake over and over? How do you break the pattern?" Tasha smiled, thinking of her own journey. "You start by being as honest with yourself as you are with your clients. You do the work, and you trust that the right kind of love, the kind that doesn't need fixing, will find you when you're ready for it." 6 months later, that's exactly what happened. She met James at a bookstore, of all places. He wasn't broken or mysterious or in need of saving. He was just a kind, funny, genuinely happy man who loved reading as much as she did. He thought her job was amazing, not something to be dismissed or fixed. He saw her strength without needing to lean on it. Their first conversation lasted 4 hours, and not once did she feel the urge to analyze or heal or save him. She just felt the urge to know him. On their third date, he asked her about her past relationships. She said, "I used to fall in love with potential. I thought love meant transforming people." "What do you think now?" he asked. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who was already whole, already himself, already enough. "Now I think love means accepting people as they are and trusting that if someone wants to grow, they'll do it for themselves, not for you." He smiled. "I like that philosophy." "Yeah," she replied, feeling lighter than she had in years. As Tasha sat in her newly decorated apartment, walls filled with her own paintings now, books scattered everywhere, plants thriving in the sunlight, she reflected on everything that had brought her to this moment. She'd lost a relationship, but she'd found herself. She'd broken her own rules, but she'd learned why those rules existed. She tried to save someone else, but in the end, she'd saved herself. The woman who used to lie awake scrolling through dating apps, desperate to be chosen, was gone. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, someone who chose carefully and loved freely, someone who understood the difference between healing and loving. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. No agenda, no expectations, just us." She smiled and typed back, "Perfect." Because sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is choose someone who doesn't need choosing, someone who chooses you back just as you are. Love, she'd learned, wasn't about potential. It was about presence. And for the first time in her life,
Tasha was finally present in her own story.